Showtime.
Okay. So a little while ago, I went down to Arizona to go camping and climbing with a couple of my buddies. And the three of them were totally incredible in high school. And so we took a trip to do some free climbing in Kochi Stronghold, which is this place way out in the desert, in the Sonoran Desert. And it's this network of canyons, and it's a really great place to go free climbing. So we went up there and we were doing a series of jumps where you go over ravines and over canyons from one boulder to the next. And the ravines get progressively wider and wider and more dangerous. And we got to one, and we looked down, and you have to think there's just no way to get across. Because it starts on a ledge, and then it gradually gets steeper and steeper, and then becomes sheer. And there's probably about 6 foot or 8 foot down before it becomes sheer. And then the ravine itself is maybe 8 or 9 feet across, and then there's a ledge on the other side. But it's too far to jump from the very top. So my friends and I, because it starts to slope down. So my friends and I are looking at this and we're like, okay, we want to get across, but this is just too far, there's no way to do it. So we're thinking about this, and all of a sudden I had a vision. And it wasn't like a dream, it was like I was experiencing it, I knew exactly the way to get across. So I pulled them together and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to run down the side of this face, and right at the point where it goes from steep to sheer, lunge out across the gully, and then grab hold of the rock on the other side, pull ourselves up. And my friends are looking at me like, you're obviously out of your mind, this is never going to work. And I was like, no, don't worry, it's okay. I got it under control. So I was like, watch me, I'll go first. So I do. Take a step forward and I start running down. And by the time you get to the place where it becomes vertical, you're literally running down a sheer face. So my body is totally horizontal. And I remember to keep enough compression in my knees so that I would have some energy to be able to pop out. So I get to that place and I lunge out across the ravine. And I had this moment where I'm suspended in midair and everything is going very slowly. And it's the first moment in which you can actually see all the way down to the bottom of the canyon floor. Because of the way it's sloped at the top, you can only see the opposite wall, and you don't really realize how far it is. But when you're out in the middle of free space, flying over like Superman, and you look down and it's about 60 feet to the bottom, and I had this realization. If anything goes wrong, you're dead. So I fly over to the other side, and I grab hold of the rock, and I hit pretty hard. And I sort of collapse on my chest, and it knocks the wind out of me just for a little bit, and I get this taste in my mouth. It's the sort of bitter taste of adrenaline and blood. But I'm okay, so I pull myself up, and I'm a little bit shaky, but I'm thinking, I gotta be cool for my friends, right? So I brush myself off, and I'm like, it was no problem, it was totally easy, exactly as I said. Okay, it's your turn. So my two friends are like, okay. So my next friend, his name's Chaley, and he was like, okay, I get it. Okay, I see what you have to do. I can do the same thing. So he takes off after me. He runs down the cliff and springs out across the ledge, grabs hold of the rock on the other side, and pulls himself up. So now the two of us are on the other side, and we're having a little discussion. We're like, this was probably more intense than we really bargained for. It's a long way down, and you don't realize that until you're already committed. But if anything goes wrong, if you don't find something to grab onto, if you slip when you're running vertically down the face, if you don't have enough compression in your knees in order to spring out across, if anything goes wrong, then you're dead. So my third friend, though, is a little bit more timid. And all through high school, he was always following us into the shenanigans that we were getting in. But it was always the person who was kind of lagging behind, was like, are you sure this is the right thing to do? And I just look over and I see him hesitating. And he's not sure whether he wants to jump, and he makes a couple of false starts. And I realized that maybe this is out of his league. I mean, it's probably out of my league, but we did it anyway. But I know that he wants to be a good friend, and he wants to, show that he can do it. He wants to follow, but he's not totally committed. So I yelled over across from him. I'm like, buddy, you're my brother. You know that I love you, and I will always love you. But if you don't absolutely 100% believe that you can make it, then don't do it. Because I'm not going to go home and have to tell your mom that you died falling off a cliff jumping out after me. Right? Like, I can't do that. So if you don't believe that you can make it, just stay on the other side, we'll climb down. So he thinks about this for a little while. And he makes a couple of peers over the side. And another couple of false starts. And then he says, okay, this is too much. I can't do it. I don't absolutely believe. So I looked at him and I was like, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. You understand you're doing the safe, smart thing. Just climb back down the other side and we'll meet you back down the other way. So my other friend, Shaylee, who did jump with me, we were walking down and we had this conversation to ourselves and we're like, that was a really crazy moment that, we very easily could have gotten our friend killed just from putting that peer pressure onto him, If we hadn't realized that he wasn't ready for this, it would have been very easy to set that up as a goal for seeking our approval, and that could have led to getting him killed. So it was a good thing that we were really tuned to that and got him off the hook. So we climbed down, we met him down the other side, and we had a good weekend for the rest of the time. But I'll always look back on that and remembering not only was that so dangerous for myself, but so dangerous for putting my friend in that situation. Okay, so that's the DHV story. Some of the elements that you probably have already guessed, there's attraction spikes. Kent talked about this before. You want to have, it's okay to touch on a couple of spikes, but one or two is the best. And actually I think that you would really want to pick just one that you want to resonate with the most. And if you brush on a few others, then that's okay, that's great. But be conscious of which spike that the majority of the time you're going to spend on. So in this one, it would be risk taker, right? Successful risk taker. I risked my life jumping over this cliff, and I live to tell about it. Okay, the next thing you want to do is be aware of what expectations you're setting with your story. If whenever you're getting the kinds of responses where people are like, at one time at band camp, and they can't figure out why you're trying to tell the story, it's because you're not laying expectations. So you lay expectations at the beginning, and then you have the choice about how you want to resolve them. You have to resolve them. You can resolve them at some other time by leaving open loops, but you have to resolve them one way or another. And you can either resolve them by fulfilling expectations, or you can resolve them by contradicting them. So that's, your story was a classic example of fulfilling expectations. We all were setting up, the setup was of this one shot, right? And we expected you to catch the puck because it felt like a cheesy sports movie, and you did. So you fulfilled our expectations, and that closed the loop, and it made it feel like a whole story, right? So in my setup, we're jumping over this cliff, and there's a couple of points in which I'm setting expectations. One is when I first jump, you're wondering, am I going to live? So that's a minor expectation because I'm still here. Obviously, I did live, right? But I still said that, and you want to know, how do I have to get backed out? Like, am I able to pull myself up? Like, what happens? So I set that expectation, and then I follow through. But then there's this expectation, no, my friends are going to follow me. So I resolve that. One of them does, one of them doesn't. But those are the expectations that I set up at the beginning. And you're probably thinking about that, wondering what's going to happen. So for your own DHV stories, think about at the beginning, the first third or so. What is the question that I am putting in my audience's mind? What do they want to know about? What are they interested in? What are they curious about what's going to happen? So they should be making some sort of prediction, have some sort of expectation. And you should be consciously aware of what that question is, what that expectation is that you're setting. And then you get the choice. You get to fulfill it. Do I fulfill it? Do I contradict it? Is it going to be a surprise ending? Is it going to be a satisfying ending? You get to close the loop. But be aware of what expectations you're setting. Okay, another thing. You want to involve the 5 senses as much as possible. Right? The more sensory your story is, the more visual it is, the more auditory it is, the more senses that you're involving, the more parts of the brain you're going to be engaging. The more they're having to think about it, the more they're having to feel it, the bigger impact it will have. The tendency, however, especially for things like smells and tastes, is to put that sort of front-loaded in the story, where you put that in the ambiance, right? Where like it's part of their setting. I was in a nice field and I smelled these poppies or whatever, and that's okay. That brings that still anchors it to different parts of their senses, and